If I go back in time like a year to my iPad Pro review, I said that the hardware was great, but the software needed time to evolve and catch up. There was no doubt in my mind that the iPad Pro was great hardware, but the apps just weren't nearly as good as their desktop counterparts in terms of features and ability to use it for professional work. And over the last year, the app that has impressed me far more than any other has been Procreate, in the way they have evolved and changed and gotten better over time. And just yesterday, Procreate released their 3.2 update, which is another big update, a lot of new features, and step by step, they're catching up and they're really impressing me as almost like a desktop caliber drawing app. The latest Procreate update lets you jump over a huge hurdle that many iPad apps have faced, and that is the ability to import a layered Photoshop file as well as export a layered Photoshop file. The iPad has always been like a one-way street. You can create great things on it and you can push those things out into the world, but once you do that, you can't pull a layered file back in, at least not easily. Some apps let you do that, like Medibang, but being able to do this, import a PSD into Procreate, fantastic new feature. Now I can set up my comic files the way I want to. I can draw all the borders in Photoshop, add text, add the word bubbles, and then I can just pull it over into Procreate with all the layers maintained. On a lot of my illustrations, I'll use Adobe Illustrator to kind of break out the flats, the basic shapes of an illustration, and then I'll pull those into Photoshop and add textures and things like that. Now I can use Procreate to do that too. Just the ability to go back and forth over and over again, it's just a nice touch, and it adds a lot of flexibility to Procreate that it just didn't have before. Now, many of the features that Procreate has added is built around the way that Photoshop has always handled layers. Now you can group layers together in a folder, which is really handy. It's nice because it makes your layers cleaner to look at, but now you can also grab that layer folder and resize everything in it at once instead of resizing each layer individually on its own. You can also do this by tapping on a layer and then swiping to the right on the other layers that you want to select and use all at the same time, and resize that way as well without using a layer folder. Also, if those layers are selected, you can do multiple actions to them at once as well. They've streamlined the layer blending mode so that they happen directly underneath the layer that you're using instead of taking you to an extra modal dialog box thing. I pulled in a couple Photoshop files just to see how it worked, to see if I could break it. For the most part, it worked really, really well. My colors, my layer folders, my blending modes, it pulled all of those things over and they looked good. If you try to import text, it's not going to be editable because Procreate doesn't have any text features. It's going to rasterize it, which means it becomes an image just like everything else. But since I was trying to break it, I managed to pull it off a couple times. For example, you can only pull in RGB images. Anything that you've created that's CMYK, like my Christmas card this year, which needs printed, it couldn't pull it in that way. I had to convert it first and then pull it over. That Christmas card is also really big. I made it 600 DPI, and so when I initially tried to pull it over with that huge file size, Procreate said, that is too big. I sized it down to a reasonable 300 DPI and I was able to pull it in at that point, no problem. So even though it pulls over all your layer blending modes and things like that, there was one thing that I found that can really break a file pretty good, and that is if you were using layer masks in Photoshop. Right now, Procreate doesn't know how to handle importing that kind of data. I used to use these a lot in my illustrations, and you can see this football player I drew about 2 years ago, tons of layer masks on this, and when I pulled it over into Procreate, it had no idea what to do with it. Some of the other updates include things like keyboard shortcuts. I didn't have a keyboard that I could hook up myself and try these things out, but just looking at the screenshot, it looks like pretty standard stuff. You know, copying, pasting, undoing. Oh, speaking of undoing, if you use 2 fingers and hold them on the canvas, you can now do multiple undos really fast in a row. And if it went too fast and you didn't mean to do that, no problem. Take 3 fingers, put them down on the canvas, and you can redo just as quickly. The other big addition that Procreate has added is their video features. Procreate has always had the ability to take an illustration that you've already drawn and export a speed draw of that happening and fast forward. This latest update lets you record your video in real time as you are doing it. It is an actual screen capture. You can also use the microphone, so you could record yourself doing audio over top of that, which is a really nice feature for people like me who want to create tutorials in real time. And if you want to get really fancy with it, you can actually do a picture-in-picture window using the camera that is located on the iPad. The downside of using that particular camera is that usually when I'm drawing, that thing's going to be pointed at the ceiling. Maybe it'll catch the side of my face or my forehead at an uncomplimentary angle. Yes, even I have uncomplimentary angles. I have the basic iPad cover. When I fold it up, it makes a nice little drawing angle, but unfortunately the camera is on the right-hand side when I'm using it that way, which means my arm is going to be covering it most of the time that I'm drawing. So for me, and the comfortable angle that I'm used to, the camera and camera thing probably isn't going to work too well. It's not to say that I don't see any uses for it. I mean, if you want to show off your work or just kind of live stream to somebody, this sort of thing could actually work really well if you're holding the iPad. Just finding the right camera angle to go with the right drawing angle, it could be a little weird. But I think Procreate's just working with what they got, and they're working with it pretty well. Not only does it do screen capturing, but you can also live stream from it. You can use Periscope or Mob something or other. What's it called? Mob Crush. It's called Mob Crush. It is another live streaming app. I've never heard of it. Might have to check that out. Right now, I don't think you can hook it up with YouTube or Facebook Live, Twitch, anything like that, but I think this is a nice step in the right direction for, live streaming some of your illustration stuff. Last but not least, they have tweaked the color palettes. They've expanded the yellows and oranges to make it easier to select in that range of color. So overall, another great update. Great to see this stuff just like adding stuff, but at the same time maintaining its elegance and simplicity. It's really starting to approach some of the desktop apps in terms of power and things that you can do with it. Fantastic update. So thanks for watching the video. I'm going to be live streaming myself, but not from Procreate. I'm going to be live streaming from my new Wacom Mobile Studio Pro. Should be arriving later this week. I've scheduled that for Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, December 8th, 2016. So if you're watching this video later, sorry you missed it, but I'll probably be archiving that. If you have any questions that you want me to answer in that stream or any questions from today's video, let me know down in the comments or hit me up on Twitter. That's all I've got. If you enjoy these videos, find them useful, consider contributing on Patreon. That's all I've got for today. I'll see you guys Thursday.